and welcome to today's session at the National Birth Summit. Today, we're going to be talking about baby health and the infant microbiome. We're recording this session on International Women's Day, which is entirely appropriate. The National Birth Summit is about bringing a child into the world, and it's about making choices, gaining information, and feeling empowered for mothers to feel empowered to bring a baby to the world. And in that process, the amazing power of women is revealed. Bridget Supple has spent the last 20 years supporting women through all stages of pregnancy, labour and parenting. A mother of four herself, she works as a childbirth educator or antenatal teacher for the National Childbirth Trust and for the National Health System in Britain, in particular, one of the largest UK maternity hospitals in Birmingham. Bridget also works for a charity that supports pregnant women in prison called Birth Companions. And she started an information resource about the infant microbiome, and she runs workshops on all aspects of parenting and preparation for parenting. Bridget contributes to the International Journal of Birth and Parent Education. There we go. And has also authored a very intriguing book called The Birth Keeper of Bethlehem. I think you've got that there with you, Bridget. Is that right?
This book, it's the fictional story of Salome, who's the midwife who's there when Mary gives birth to Jesus. So it's all about birth and midwifery and ancient traditions and not about Jesus, which you would think. It is about the women who were there around his birth.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Okay. It's my pleasure today to welcome Bridget Supple to lead the conversation as an authority on the infant microbiome. Welcome, Bridget.
Hi, thank you, Adam. Well, joy to be here on International Women's Day. As you say, it is one of those moments where we celebrate, and this one's all about equality, this particular Women's Day. But I think it's celebrating, the amazingness of women, but also one of the things that we talk about today is that equality in the birthplace, that empowerment, and making sure that women have the opportunity for their births to be that transformative experience it can be if it is done well. Now, today we're on the microbiome, which is also one of those things that gives babies a brilliant start. But I do love the fact that we are recording on International Women's Day. Very exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. So start off telling us, Bridget, what is the microbiome?
So the microbiome is your bacterial self. For every human cell you have at least one bacteria, virus, fungi that lives all over on and in you. Now, I know that sounds a little gross, but actually it's brilliant. It's brilliant because we live in a bacterial world. We have evolved alongside bacteria, and they've actually become part of how we function as humans. So you're teeming in them. They're literally all over you. They're between your fingers, all over your skin, up your nose, in your ears. But the majority of them are in the gut. And a lot of you will have heard about the benefits of sort of gut bacteria and having healthy gut. And it's absolutely true because we have a mostly symbiotic relationship with this, what we call the microbiome, which is this combination of things, because they perform crucial roles for us as a human. So, for example, it is your gut bacteria that digests the final fibers that make it through the intestines, converts it to short-chain fatty acids, and literally feeds the cells. It's your gut bacteria that's making vitamins that you can't make or store yourself, like the water-soluble B vitamins and vitamin K. And we see all sorts of connections with immunity and long-term health. So when your microbiome, when your bacterial self is healthy, the human attached to that microbiome tends to be healthier too. So it's really, really important in terms of long-term health. But that's your microbiome. We are teeming with life, which is to say, a bit icky, but also really quite fantastic.
And that's a great introduction. And this area, the evidence, the research on this is exploding, isn't it? It's been building up slowly and it's now really exploding, isn't it? Tell us, you've given a hint of this, but tell us about the importance of the microbiome in terms of the importance. Why should we care enough to try to ensure that it develops in the right way? It clearly it's there whether we like it or not. But why is it important that we would want to consciously think about it?
So first of all, let's think about you. Let's think about yourself, and then we'll think about the impact that it has on babies and why it's so important in early life. But your microbiome is running all these crucial roles within your body. Ideally, your gut bacteria, and 95% of the trillions of bacteria that live in you are in your gut. And ideally, there should be a wide diversity of species in there. As with many things, strength is in diversity. And if you are eating well and living a fairly healthy lifestyle, and depending on how it's been formed in early life, and there are all sorts of factors that can affect this, but a healthy microbiome tends to be associated in the gut with a healthier human. If that balance, if that diversity starts to get affected, sometimes a species can get a strong hold and you can get a dominance of a species. And even a good bacteria can go almost badly behaved if it starts to over-dominate. So it's all about balance, and it's all about sort of making sure that that everything is in level, really, under control. Because when you get an imbalance in your gut microbiome, when what we call a dysbiosis, that has been associated, well, with anything colonic, all the colonic cancers, things like irritable bowel disease, diabetes, very strong indicators in having a role in there. Mental health disorders as well. And scientists know a lot of this because they've done a lot of experiments with sterile mice, so mice that they have bred to have no bacteria in or on them. Now, if you were to take a sample of the gut bacteria from an obese mouse and transplant that into our sterile mouse, with no change in diet and with no change in exercise, the sterile mouse will become fat. So it's not what they're eating, it's not the exercise that they're doing, it's how their gut bacteria breaks down the food that's affecting obesity. Isn't that just quite remarkable?
Wow. Okay.
Studies where they've taken gut bacteria from very stressed mice that they have put under stressful conditions, and transplanted that into our sterile mouse with nothing in their environment to frighten them, they will show anxious behaviors. So we see a strong correlation between gut health and mental health. But you probably know this because when you're stressed in your head, where do you feel it?
Yeah, in your gut. Yeah.
It goes the other way around.
That tension in your stomach, isn't it? Yeah.
But it goes the other way around because your gut bacteria actually sends hormonal signals to your body. So they're meant to send signals, for example, saying, you're full, stop eating, Bridget. Mine appear not to be working on this one.
I think they're slow. That's the slow signal, isn't it?
Well, that signal is definitely on delay at the moment. But also, if your microbes are stressed, and perhaps if there's a species dominating, they might be, then you can see these correlations between gut health and mental health. So it's phenomenally important. I mean, there are some indications that it's the start of Parkinson's. There have been suggestions around it, the beginning of multiple sclerosis. But, so many diseases. Wherein people with COPD or asthma, they tend to have a lower diversity of bacteria in the airways than they should have. And that is believed to be connected with the development. So I think there's a study, and we can share the slide on this, that shows that about 90% of disease can be associated with your microbiome. So it's really, really important.
So that is very interesting. It sounds as though the evidence is emerging. Right now, we're at the stage of we're learning a lot. We're learning a lot about correlative. We're not there yet on causation, are we? But that will come over time. Yeah. Would you characterize this as being, we know enough that the case for action is compelling?
Oh, yes. It's like, think of your gut bacteria as the rainforest of your body. The rainforest of your body. If you think of the whole planet and you think of the different climates that we have, so my skin, very dry, a bit like a savanna. But the rainforests, as we know, provide so much oxygen for the whole planet. They help clean the air for everybody. True? So they keep the whole planet safer. And your gut bacteria is doing roles for the whole of you that really matter. I don't know if this is true, but I read it on the wall of a museum, and I tend to find they tend to be quite evidence-based. But it said that something like 85% of all medical cures that we have their basis in rainforest plants. All right? And we have picked out so much of the rainforest. We don't even know what we've lost. We don't even know the species that we don't have anymore. But we are waking up to their importance in global health. And that's happened over the last. And it's exactly the same with the microbiome. Now, what is really interesting is that when they find tribes that still live very, very traditionally, so old nomadic tribes or tribes that have not been contacted before, and they look at their microbiome, they are significantly more diverse than ours. They reckon in the Western world, we have lost a third of the diversity of our gut bacteria. And that in the last sort of 40, 50 years. And that decrease in diversity coincides with a 40% increase in non-communicable diseases. So those are diseases you can't catch, like obesity, like cancer, like diabetes. And we think those are related.
That does sound compelling. Okay, great. Having established that then, so how do we get our microbiome? How does it develop?
Well, this is the magical thing about it, because humans are quite remarkable. We've survived and thrived all over the globe. So I want you to imagine a baby being born into the Arctic Circle. I want you to think about the bacteria that they would be exposed to there, the foods that they need to digest. Compare that to a baby being born in the Amazon rainforest or an African savanna. Just pick a part of the world. Think about the difference in diet, in bacteria, in diseases that they have to counter. So DNA can only help so far. So what happens is we currently are pretty sure that babies are sterile in the womb. So in the womb, we found traces of bacterial DNA, not the same as finding bacteria. And we also find that there are these beautiful systems happening that are getting them ready for birth. But so far, all the evidence suggests that they are sterile. Okay. In the run-up to birth, the bacteria in mum's birth canal is changing. It's changing. We see a change in the pH, crowding out bad bacteria, and an increase in what you would think of as good starter bacteria. So things like bifidobacterium and lactobacilli. Mum goes into labor, waters break at some point, and as baby passes down the birth canal, they are coated in this bacteria. And I want you to think of it as a payload, as a starter kit. So the baby's gut is sterile, and the mum is going to pass on a starter kit of bacteria. And this starter kit is a purely maternal heritage. So your mother, her mother, your great-great-great-great-grandmothers all passed on a little bit of bacterial information of what you need to survive and thrive in the bit of the world that you're living in. So, for example, if you look at the whole cohort of Japan, you would find that they have more of a bacteria that helps digest seaweed than you would find anywhere else, which makes sense, doesn't it? So
it does.
Brilliant payload. And it is not also an accident that in birth, the birth canal and the rear passage are so close together, because we don't want the baby to just get vaginal bacteria. A bit of fecal matter actually is part of the process of seeding the baby. And I know that sounds a little icky, but actually it's part of the process. That's
we're out of the comfort zone now.
Babies then are born, we do skin to skin, we're colonizing their skin bacteria. And the final piece of the puzzle is breast milk. The idea is, and this is absolutely no opinion on how you choose to feed your baby at all, this is just science, but the bacteria is given to the baby. And when you breastfeed, really interesting things happen. Number one, breast milk is full of microbes for the baby. So a third of baby's microbes will actually be in breast milk. But there is also an element in breast milk that is completely of no use to the baby. Baby can't digest it. Now, 20 years ago, when I started practicing, they talked about a carbohydrate in breast milk that was no use to the baby. We know what it is now. And it's so, look, I get a bit excited talking about it. They're called human milk oligosaccharides. We've identified 200 so far, and they're food only for the microbes. And some of those human milk oligosaccharides will only feed particular strains of, say, bifidobacterium. So if the baby's got that bacteria and they get fed that human milk oligosaccharide, they will get a benefit. It's like unlocking a level on a game. They only get that unlocked if they get fed breast milk. So it's this remarkable system of seeding the baby's microbiome and feeding the microbiome to make sure that your baby has the best bacterial start, which will in turn protect their health for the rest of their life. Yeah.
That is really amazing. And it's extraordinary that so much has been learned in that period of 20 years you're talking about.
Yes.
That we kind of dismissed it as being, it's just carbohydrate. that you can't use. But we know that the body doesn't have things it doesn't use. It's a system, and it's it's an incredible system, isn't it?
Yeah. And at the end of a feed, baby will put a little bit back into the breast. The body will analyze it, and if it finds anything that's a threat to the baby, by the time you next feed, be releasing the antibodies and things like that. I mean,
I didn't know that.
Well, the back
really?
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
But this is why sort of birth and thinking about the microbiome in birth is so important, because what we really want, if for the long-term health of your baby, is to give them the best bacterial start. And that's the key. And that's why I want everybody who listens to this or works in birth or is expecting a baby to have the microbiome in mind in terms of pregnancy and birth. Because if we can get this right at birth, we can help protect a baby's health literally for the rest of their lives. Which is something, isn't it?
That really is amazing. Okay, so that's been a great introduction about the importance of the microbiome, and you've talked about how the birth process, the baby coming through the birth canal, and that skin-to-skin contact and breastfeeding, how all these things add to a really powerful transfer of bacteria from the mother to the child, to the baby. And what I wanted to move on to with that foundation in place is talk about what can a pregnant mother do and what should she think about in pregnancy that can support the development in the future of the infant microbiome.
Perfect. Brilliant question, because what we want to do is have the healthiest payload as possible to pass on. Now, even if I weren't here today talking to you about the microbiome, if I were here talking to you with a sort of brain development hat on, I would be suggesting that in pregnancy, we work on reducing stress. Your microbes do not like being stressed, and it doesn't do them any good. Now, pregnancy is a short period in a big life. So I would really think about protecting yourself, stay away from, there are some people, they walk in the room and all the joy leaves, doesn't it? If you can stay away from those. Sometimes we often work that brings this on, and we can't necessarily change work at this point. But making a practice of perhaps leaving wherever you work at lunchtime if you can, having a decompression maybe when you get home from work, where you have 10 minutes where you the foulness of your day, take your clothes off, go and have a shower, go and have a bath, leave it. Now, yes, all of these self-care things, like candles and baths, can be wonderful at reducing stress, but sometimes it isn't that simple. It isn't enough. If you need to get more help, get that help. This is really, it's beneficial for you, and I want you to be well and happy and healthy, but equally it's really good for baby as well. Eating. Now, this is the key. They say you are what you eat, but I would argue you are what your microbes eat, because that determines what your microbiome is made up of and how well things survive and flourish or don't. So you want a wide variety of non-processed food. The more processed it is, the less it actually brings to the table in terms of live microorganisms. Now, there are two types of food. There's prebiotics and probiotics. And a lovely way I saw this described is, you remember Pac-Men? You remember Pac-Men go along and eat the little dots? Yes, do you remember?
I do. A lot of time spent with that particular person, yeah.
So, so I want you to think about probiotics are the bacteria and they eat the food. And prebiotics are the little dots and they are the food. All right? So probiotics.
Okay.
So probiotics bring bacteria into the body. So anything that is fermented, so your miso soup, your sauerkraut, your bio yogurts, all of these sorts of things. And it's not an accident that so many cultures around the world ferment food. Yes, it helps store it, but it's really good for your gut bacteria as well. Right. So all these fermented foods, your kimchi, your kombucha, all of those things are going to help add bacteria to your gut. But then they also need feeding. And as I say, the key is a wide variety of non-processed food. Because imagine you've got 1,000 species in your gut, trillions of bacteria, thousands of species.
Yeah.
They all need a little something extra in terms of nutrition. So I have this with my teenagers all the time. They think if they've had peas with a meal, that they've had some vegetables. And I'm like, come on, go back. we need to try again. So if you were making a salad, you might have a couple of different types of lettuce. You might have a bit of white cabbage in there. You might have, I think it's cilantro, it's called in the States. We call it coriander in the UK. You might have tomatoes and cucumber and peppers and a bit of spring onion, for example, as well. And look at that. That's 8 different types of food for
right.
And the more variety that you can put in, the better. Things like onion, garlic, Jerusalem artichokes, all of those sorts of things are known good food for the microbes. But the key is wide variety of non-processed food. Can't say the words green leafy vegetables enough
at
this moment. Well, I also want you to get outdoors. It's good for your mental health, it's good for your well-being, but actually exposure to nature is fantastic. Exercise. Now, pregnant women should be aiming to do 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week. If you can do that outdoors, 2 birds, 1 stone. But again, exercise is actually good for your microbiome.
Okay.
I also want you to back away from the industrial cleaners. Most people now use things like antibac and antibacterial spray in their homes. And it says on the front, kills 99.9%, yes? Right up until this moment, that probably seemed quite reassuring, didn't it? But my question to you...
Right. We now see it differently.
Yes, if you have a symbiotic relationship with most of the bacteria in our body, don't get me wrong, there's a couple of species in there that if they get out of control could do you harm, but most of it's fine, good. Does your antibac only take out the bad stuff?
Probably not.
No, it takes out everything. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I have a 15-year-old son. He had a gang of his 15-year-old friends to sleep over the other week. I went into the bathroom they'd all used afterwards. I did bleach the toilet seat. I really did, because it was foul, to be honest. But what I would never do is spray that stuff all over the walls, because if you're pouring it or spraying it, you're breathing it. So be very mindful of what you're cleaning your house with. Now, be careful with the hygiene hypothesis. I'm not saying, because if it were true that being utterly filthy was brilliant for your microbiome, children living in abject poverty with cockroaches and mold-ridden homes would have the best health in the world, and that doesn't stack up. But over cleanliness is not as good for you as I think it is presented.
Sounds like balance again.
Always. So reducing your stress, eating well, getting outdoors, exercise, back away from the industrial cleaners. It's an excuse to get some rest, isn't it?
Okay, great. And so I think what you were saying there was that's good for development of the mother's microbiome, which will then help the baby, but it's also good for mother's mental health and her mindset and her confidence in what she's doing. And so, I think that's it. I wasn't expecting you to talk about managing your own stress level and protecting your your space from people who don't help with your stress level. But that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think that I think very often we try to please and try to do the right thing and turn up for people and don't want to offend or be difficult. And that good girl syndrome is very well drummed in. But this is a really important part of your life. This is a really small time in a great big life. So do something every day that makes you happy. Step away from the things that stress you out. It's a nice thing to do, actually. You may never give it up. Now,
sorry, go on.
I do want to talk about what happens in this transmission of birth. So we've got this really healthy microbiome. And I just want to answer a question that comes up quite a lot of what happens if babies are born in water, for example. So water comes up a lot. Does that have an impact on how the microbiome is formed? And reassuringly, the evidence says no, because babies pick up the the bacteria while they are in the birth canal. And it's very rare that babies sort of pop in and pop straight out. They tend to sit in the birth canal for a while. So when babies are born in water, which has all sorts of advantages in terms of being relaxing and supportive and less likely to have interventions, which have their own knock-on effects. But actually, there was a small study there. It was quite small, but it looked at 34 women who gave birth in water, 34 or 36 women, I think, who gave birth on land, and some who laboured in water but then gave birth on land. and it didn't make any difference to the microbiome. So I think that's really important to flag.
Okay.
A lot of people worry that a water birth will alter it. Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Yeah, because in their minds, it's the water birth will wash the bacteria off the baby in some way.
Yeah, but we don't wash our microbiome away every time we have a bath or a shower, do we?
Thank goodness.
The important thing is that they sit in the birth canal and they have this exposure.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So you can promote the development of your baby's microbiome and use water for labour and birth. No effects.
Yeah. And actually, there is evidence that shows that the gold standard for microbial seeding is a home vaginal birth with immediate skin to skin and breastfeeding, because at home baby's only exposed to the kind of bacteria that you get in their home where they're going to be living. Whereas when they're born in hospital, you get a few more hospital bacteria in there. So it's not a criticism of hospital birth, it's just to say that we know that there are actually differences. So the gold standard. Now, if you have a home vaginal birth with skin to skin and breastfeeding, honestly, you don't really have to think about the microbiome. You don't have to pay it much attention. That's the system. It gets transferred. That's how it's supposed to. Where we really need to pay attention is if something's a bit different. So if, for example, babies aren't born by but aren't born vaginally, if it isn't a natural birth, if they are born a different way. So if they're born by cesarean, they don't pass down a birth canal. They don't pick up their starter kit. So we know that the bacteria that they get first is a little bit different. Now, in 2018, The Lancet, which is a really well-respected British medical journal, did a whole issue on the differences that are made when babies are born by cesarean versus vaginally, and the long-term impacts on health. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. I'm not knocking cesarean birth. My eldest, my lovely boy Alex, was born by emergency cesarean. And if he hadn't been able to be born by cesarean, we wouldn't have him. Cesareans are marvellous. Yeah, but that's brilliant. However, if I had known 22 years ago what I know now about the microbiome, I could have done so much more to protect his when he was little. So this is not about knocking cesarean. This is just about saying, look, if they don't pass down a birth canal, if they don't pick up their starter kit, then there's going to be a difference. And this is, again, be very, very careful with this. Recognize that there is a 20% increase in the chance of babies who are born by cesarean of having things like asthma and allergies. And they think it's because they get a different starter kit of bacteria. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that if your baby is born by cesarean, they will have asthma and allergies. But a 20% increase. It's
a higher risk, and 20% is a significant increase.
Yeah, that's a lot of children being affected by their health. And it has long-term implications for their whole life. So anything that we can do that can protect the microbiome when babies need to be born by cesarean, or it's chosen that they're born by cesarean, is helpful.
And these days, most cesarean sections, you will be given the baby for skin to skin afterwards, which wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago. But what else is going to help to try to make up for that gap of not having acquired bacteria through the birth canal transition? What else is important? What can people do?
Right. So number one, there are different types of cesareans. So if you've been in labour, the waters are broken, and then baby will have had some seeding. They will have picked up some of that bacteria. So that is a little bit different. If you have an elective or a planned cesarean where there is no labour, then baby doesn't have any of that experience of labour, which helps prime baby for life on the outside, but certainly won't have picked up any of the gut bacteria.
Right.
Skin to skin is really important. The key, though, is breastfeeding. Now, I always say, look, I don't want anybody to have to do anything with their breasts that they don't want to do. But if you have a baby who's born by planned cesarean and formula feed from day one, where do they get their starter kit? Where do they get that first payload from?
Yeah, now, so they can get a small amount from skin to skin, but it's a limited.
But it's different. Yeah. It's skin bacteria.
And it's different. Okay. So it's not less of the same thing. It's different.
It's different. It's a different
right,
thing.
Okay.
That's what you tend to find. That babies who are born by cesarean have much more of a skin bacteria. Pardon me, a cuckoo clock is about to go off right now. So just if you can hear that, bear with us.
That's okay.
But they have more of skin bacteria and the skin of people in theatre. So things that we can do to help. Breast milk packed full of microbes. Now, if the biggest protector of a baby born by cesarean is extended breastfeeding, so for as long as you can. But even if you just breastfeed once, even if that first feed. Now, do remember that mum, after a cesarean birth, will very sensibly need to have antibiotics. They will also affect the breast milk. So one theory is to collect some colostrum. If you're over 20 weeks pregnant, you've got colostrum in your breasts, tiny syringe, harvest some before you go in for your planned cesarean birth. So before you've had the antibiotics. Don't freeze it, keep it fresh, and give that to the baby. Now, ideally, it's not an instead of breastfeeding, it's an as well. But it means that they have uninterrupted, unaffected breast milk as well.
Yeah, not affected by the antibiotics,
not affected by the antibiotics. But the key is extended breastfeeding. I mean, there's an awful lot of interesting stuff that goes on around breast milk and mode of birth, but that is the key. You can also bring a blanket from home to wrap the blanket around the baby when you get to recovery, so they've got home bacteria rather than just hospital. Maximize skin to skin with immediate family members in the first 24 hours, so as much holding them as we can. And these things can be. Now, there are two lines of sort of study that are coming and are not currently evidence-based. One is vaginal swabbing, where they take a bit of bacterium in the vagina to put on the baby after the birth. Promising in pilot studies, but of course, do remember that you run the risk of passing on bad bacteria if mum has not been screened for things like bacterial vaginosis, STDs, group B strep. So only done at the moment under trial conditions and very supervised. And there was a really icky study that came out of Helsinki 2 years ago, which gave babies, please do not try this at home, fecal matter from their mums in breast milk. And that really did restore the gut bacteria. But we're a long way from that being something that we do. But interesting that it's a way to restore them. At the moment, breastfeeding is the key. Yeah, it really is.
That's interesting. I mean, it's I didn't recoil when he said fecal matter transplant, because I have heard of that in reading about gut health but not around in the birth process, but generally. So it's an interesting one, and it's we may all have to get more comfortable with that idea.
Yeah, very good. But that was just a very promising trial study and is a long way from being something.
Right. I understand that. Okay, great. And now you talked about the importance of breastfeeding for any amount of time, but particularly the more you extend, the better. Does that apply to expressing? Is there any difference between expressing if they're unable to latch? Is there a difference between giving express milk and being on the breast?
Fascinatingly, there is, yes, because there is a biodynamic relationship between the baby and the breast. So when the baby does that backwash, when their lips and their saliva interact with the breast, they give signals to the baby, to the breast, and that alters the makeup of the milk that comes back. It's quite fascinating stuff.
There's a feedback loop in breastfeeding?
There is a feedback loop in breastfeeding, yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
And it is interesting. And it's not a criticism on how people choose to feed their baby. Genuinely, in the nicest sense, I don't care how you choose to feed your baby. I just like talking about the science. But 61% of the UK population believe there's no difference between breast milk and formula. And actually, that's really not the case. There's a world of difference. It's not biodynamic. Yeah. But what I was going to say, there was a study that came out of, I think it was a 2019 study, that showed that pumped milk is still really beneficial for babies. So if it's pumped milk and given as a baby as expressed breast milk, it's still really beneficial. It still has all this friendly bacteria, but it is different than if the baby has interacted with the breast, which is just fascinating, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that is amazing. It sounds like we could delve into this for a long time. And
we need. I know we're short of time and we need to finish up, but I just want to reassure everybody, and this is very important, that it is not all set at birth. Not all set at birth. There are all sorts of things that impact how a microbiome develops. So there is the mode of birth. Yes, there is the health of the payload that mum passes over. But there's also how you are fed. There's also when you are weaned. And as soon as you introduce solid food, what that is going to impact. So again, a healthier weaning food And so much food that babies are given is highly processed. It's in jars, it's in pouches and things like that. And it doesn't have that live element of bacteria that you get when babies are being fed fresh food. And I know that has a cost implication. I don't want anybody to feel bad if they are short of money or time stressed or things, but it is thinking about how can we make sure that baby gets these live elements in their diet. Making sure your toddler gets outside. So often now toddlers are kept in and they only go to places that are indoors to play. But being outdoors, having that exposure to nature is incredibly good for their microbiome. Did you know that having a dog in the first 2 years of your life is really good for your microbial health? I've got two. The reason is because they're mucky and they bring in dirt.
Yes. Especially if you wash your dog as little as I do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm not fans of being washed. So it's all of these things they reckon by about the age of 3, it's 60 to 70% established. So for the rest of your life, you can only alter that 30-ish% with diet.
Okay.
So early life really matters, but it's not all.
Okay, so you're saying that it's not all set. There's things you can do at every step, and so if one step isn't optimal for developing the microbiome, then it's not the end of the world.
Yep.
Move on, keep try to make the other steps great. I think that's what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Yes. And babies will need to be born by cesarean, absolutely fine. But if you go down that route, think about their microbiome. When you're thinking about your birth, and we don't always add this into the cost-benefit analysis of how do I have my baby, but when natural birth is supported, when babies are born vaginally, when everything is supported and more peaceful and mum is less stressed, all of these things contribute to your baby having that better, healthier start. And this is why I'm so passionate about what I do, because there is this myth that will not go away, and this terrible phrase that healthy mum, healthy baby, nothing else matters. Right? Healthy mum, healthy baby is entry level. That's the flipping minimum that anybody should be going for. What we really want is empowered, positive, but also all of these little subtle advantages that most of us didn't even realize babies get when birth is good. And I think that's the driving force for me. And if I can prevent one child going through life with the difficulties that comes with food allergies, with the stress that comes with having asthma and the like, then all of this is worthwhile, because that is the key. I want your babies to be well and healthy and happy and have that for the whole of their lives.
Okay, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. This has been an incredible conversation. I really appreciate Bridget taking time to share that with us. And we could have this conversation in a year and a lot more. We may know a lot more. So it's a moving picture, isn't it? And it's emerging. And but we know enough. It's what I've got from this is we know enough to be able to understand how important it is and what steps we can take to be giving our baby the best start possible, and to really feeling connected and that we have done everything to facilitate that best start.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. Thank you. And thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Yes, and we will we'll stop in a moment. But before we go, if people want to know more, where should they go? Can they come to your? Do you have a Facebook group or a web page that they can come and find more information?
I do. There's babiesbiome.org. I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's all just information. It's all free. Go and have a look at that. I'm also on Facebook on Your Baby's Biome as well. And keep you updated there with new science that comes out. And it's all there. It's all free, because what I really want is babies to have that best bacteria.
We're hearing that passion. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, Bridget, and take care.
Take care.
Enjoy the rest of International Women's Day.
I will. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye now.